Our next session, which is led by Dr. Lonell Coetzee, explores how we design systems that support success, not just prevents failures. Dr. Coetzee, and there's quite a few Dr. Coetzees in the hall today. Dr. Coetzee is an accomplished aviation professional holding an airline transport pilot license in the helicopter category. She also holds a grade 2 instructor rating. She has more than 2 decades of experience in this industry, and she combines that operational experience with academic leadership. She currently serves not only as the group head IT at Henley Air, she's also the academic director at the Henley Aeronautical Institute of Learning, and the discipline leader for aviation at Stadio Higher Education, while remaining a helicopter line pilot for Henley Air. She truly does it all. Prior to her transition into full-time helicopter operations, she spent 18 years as an air traffic control approach radar instructor. Apologies, let me say that again. As an approach radar instructor at OR Tambo International Airport, the busiest airport in South Africa. This unique background enables her to combine her operational flying, her systems thinking, and aviation education, and bring that experience to the Henley Air Group and the larger industry. Thank you. Lonell, please join.
Good morning, everyone. I realize that I'm literally standing between you and the lovely snacks at the back there. So I'm not going to be very long, and I'm really going to try to make this as interesting for you as I can. So last year, I don't know if those of you that were here, I spoke about Safety 2, and I think that's probably becoming my middle name at this stage. And I don't know if any one of you has not heard of Safety 2. Don't be scared. A lot of people, put up the hand if you haven't heard of it. That's good. So if somebody hasn't heard of it, there's a QR code there that you are welcome to scan if you want to go learn more about Safety 2 itself. It's just a link to last year's speech. But basically, I'm hoping to tickle your curiosity enough today to really go listen to that again and to see what it actually entails in practice. So the basic idea of Safety 2 is very simple. It's not built on investigating failure. So usually in aviation what we do is we investigate failure when something goes wrong. And the idea with Safety 2 is to investigate what goes right before something goes wrong. So bear with me. It's built on understanding how work normally goes right under real conditions, with real people, real pressure, and then strengthening that and creating more of the things that go right. And today, I wanted to take a step further and make it practical, because as pilots, as you know, we are practical people. We're not really interested in safety language or fancy presentation or academic insight. All of that disappears the moment the rotors start turning. And if an idea cannot help a pre-flight decision, a fuel call, a weather call, a turn back, a threat brief or a debrief after a difficult sortie, then it's not really worth much to us. So I hope to provide that today in the time available. And there are many different ways of implementing Safety 2. We often get asked, that's great, wonderful idea, but how do you actually implement it? And there's many different ways, but I'm going to try and focus on one specific way that I've found to be hopefully quite practically useful in implementing this into a regular everyday operation. And it's one that's actually quite useful in the multifaceted area that we find ourselves in as helicopter pilots. So we begin to look at what is called the varieties of human work, and Megan touched on it. She started on it. I'm going to take you a little bit deeper into it. It sounds academic. Please just bear with me. The idea is actually very straightforward, and you'll find that it might be very useful in your everyday operation. In any operations, there are different versions of the same job. Why? Because we're all humans, and we will do the simplest of tasks differently. Each one of us here will be given one task that says exactly the same set of instructions, and we'll all do it differently because we are humans. Firstly, work as imagined. So that is how people think the job is done. Very easy. Work as prescribed. Megan has gone through this. I'm going to brief through this really quickly. It's how manuals, SOPs, checklists, etc. say that it should be done. Work as disclosed. How people describe the job in meetings, reports, audits, and investigations. And then there's work as done. It is what really happens out on the line, in the aircraft, on the helipad, at the scene, over the mountain, in the dust, at the end of a long day, and when conditions are changing. So, understanding the varieties of human work matters because when we look at accidents, human factors are always in there somewhere. Obviously, as Bruce said, pilots always standing at the crash scene. Very often, we see familiar patterns. We see people adapting, improvising, trading off, and trying to get the job done. Then, once it's all gone wrong, we give those patterns names, and we try and solve the problem. But the names are usually correct, but they are often too late. And to explain what I mean, let's take an everyday example. If Buta will allow me some hypothetical license throw in for the sake of explanation. So we all, hopefully, do pre-flights every day. That's me doing a pre-flight. Let's say my employer, Henley Air, wants me to do a full pre-flight before every flight as part of my duties, in line with our company values of excellence, reliability, safety, care, and sustainability. Now, that's work as imagined. Let's say our company SOPs formalize this requirement in writing, legally obligating me to do a full pre-flight procedure before every flight. But now Jan is here and he'll tell you that the UI's pre-flight procedure takes an hour, correct? So this SOP could be something that creates unnecessarily tedious work before every single flight because several items are only really required on the first flight of the day. But my SOP says I must do a full pre-flight before every flight. This is work as prescribed, which you can now see is already slightly different from work as imagined. Let's further say that I decide not to do the full pre-flight every day. Flip, the helicopter's already been fully pre-flighted, and I skip the tedious elements on subsequent flights. Why? Not because I'm trying to break rules, but I can't physically get all my flying done in the day if I had to follow this procedure. So now you can see work as done is already far removed from work as imagined and work as prescribed. Come audit time, however, I report that, of course, I do a full pre-flight every time before I fly, to tick the audit box and not to raise a finding. This is work as disclosed. Were you listening earlier? Disclosed. You can clearly see the very large gap right there in the middle between these four types of work. Why is that problematic? Firstly, we do need to reduce the gap. I think that much is obvious so far. In order to reduce it, we would need management to understand the realities of the job, to write realistic SOPs that, whilst ensuring safety, allows pilot to still get the job done, and then, come audit time, there are no secrets, no surprises. We just report what we do on a daily basis. The overlap in the varieties of human work is where the magic lies. The system is more resilient. It's able to absorb performance variability. We spoke about that earlier. Every time a task is performed by humans, there's slight variability in how that it's done. Not a big word, but that's what it means. And absorbing performance variability is easier if there is overlap in these four types. So, why do we need to reduce the gap? There are many hazards lurking in the gap between the four ways of work. I've picked two here because I want to focus on them. Megan took you pretty much through normalization of deviance. It is as Megan explained, when the departure from the standard slowly stops feeling like normal, because nothing bad has happened the last few times that we've done it, and then it becomes accepted, and then it slowly becomes the new normal. Okay, so we leave that there. Megan covered that. Escalation of commitment combines with this in a very dangerous way. It's when people keep investing in a plan because they've already spent time, fuel, effort, pride, expectation or momentum in this plan, even though the signs are increasingly saying that the safer option is to stop, change course, or turn back. Simple enough, right? Now here's the important point. Both of these hazards grow in the gaps between the varieties of human work. Let's bring that into helicopter flying. Helicopter operations are full of variability. I don't need to preach to the converted. You know this. We operate close to terrain, wires, weather, obstacles, customers, and often close to time pressure. We land in places that were never supposed to be landing sites. We deal with slopes, dust, recirculation, brownout, power margins, sometimes pitch darkness, fuel logistics, rising terrain, just name them, we deal with it. VIP pressure, contract pressure, fading daylight, we've all seen these pressures. And we all know the sentence, let's just have a look. We've heard, all of us have heard that. That sentence sounds harmless, it sounds measured, it sounds reversible, but many times it's the verbal doorway into escalation of commitment. Because once you have launched, once you've started investing, once the mission has begun to move, it becomes much harder psychologically to stop. The mission starts pulling you forward. And then, and only then, when it combines with normalization of deviance, things get even more dangerous. Am I saying don't dispatch? No. Keep listening. Because if you have done something unsafe 5 times and you have gotten away with it before, it stops feeling like a deviance. It starts feeling like experience. It starts feeling like judgment. It starts feeling like how the operation actually really works. And this is why a purely reactive safety system starts to struggle. It waits for the strike, the exceedance, the accident, the hard landing, the weather trap, the wire event, the fuel scare, the tail rotor problem, or that awkward internal report before it starts asking questions. Safety 2 asks the questions earlier, and good questions. It asks, why are crews routinely, what are they doing to make the job succeed? Where are they adapting? And where might those successful adaptations drift into unsafe normality if we leave them alone? If work as imagined is far from work as done, management thinks the job is neat and stable when it's actually messy and full of variables. If work as prescribed is far away from work as done, crews start relying on workarounds. Some of those workarounds may be necessary, but also they quietly eat into the safety margin. And if work is disclosed as far away from work as done, then the organization is blind. It doesn't even know that it has a problem, and it doesn't know what's happening at the front end. At that point, you don't have predictive safety, you have delayed surprise. So, the practical safety 2 job is to reduce the gap and increase the overlap. We've established that. Think back to the Venn diagram. The safer organization is not the one with the thickest manuals or the one with the most procedures. It's the one where what leaders imagine, what procedures prescribe, what crews say, and what crews are actually doing overlap. Not perfectly. Perfect overlap is never possible, but the larger the overlap, the better the organization understands itself. It understands where the pressure points are, it understands where the adaptation is necessary, and where the drift may begin. And because it sees those things early, it can act early. And that is predictive mitigation. But there is a catch. This kind of overlap only happens when there is a healthy safety culture. Why? If the culture is punitive, political, defensive, ego-driven, or obsessed with appearances, people will protect themselves. They will tell management what sounds acceptable. They will describe the neat version of the job, not the real version of the job. And in that kind of environment, work as disclosed moves very quickly away from work as done. So a healthy safety culture is absolutely vital. If you want honest conversations about how the job is really done, people need a safe space in which to have those conversations. They need to know that if they speak openly about the pressures, the trade-offs, the shortcuts, the uncertainty, or the fact that the procedure doesn't quite match reality, that they won't be treated as weak, disloyal, or incompetent. And without that, the organization ends up listening to a cleaned up version of itself, and that is dangerous. So, what does practical implementation look like? Do we stop flying? Do we stop at the first hint of trouble? Do we decline every call because what if? No. We simply try to predict the areas after the dispatch, where we are at greatest risk by being honest with ourselves so that we can mitigate accordingly and prevent escalation of commitment. And here's how we do it. In your organization, pick one recurring task. Just one, not 20, one. It could be a EMS launch near last light. It could be a charter into rising terrain. We all know the things that happen in our organization on a daily basis. It could be that last game count at dusk in an area with lots of wires. We all know our operation, one repetitive item. Then look at that task through 4 lenses. How is it imagined by management, training, and supervision? How is it prescribed by SOPs, manuals, limits, and briefs? How is it usually described in audits, reports, or informal conversations? And lastly, how is it actually done? On a hard day, when the weather is not quite where you hoped it would be, the customer is pushing, the time is short, and the job still needs to be done. That conversation is gold, but it is only gold if it is honest. And honesty depends on trust. If the room is not safe, the answers will not be real. People will perform. They'll give you the procedural answer. They'll give you the answer that protects them. They will give you an answer they think that management wants to hear. And everyone then leaves feeling more comfortable, but nothing has actually changed. And this is why safety culture matters so much. A healthy safety culture means that leaders can listen without jumping straight to blame. It means safety conversations are curious rather than prosecutorial. And it means that pilots can say, this part of the SOP does not match the reality, or this customer creates pressure every single time, or this is where we are quietly accepting more risk than what we should. And that statement is treated as operational intelligence and not insubordination. The moment you ask that 4th question properly, you stop pretending that the manual is the whole operation and you start seeing the real operation. And you may discover that crews are launching with a mental weather limit that's not the same as the written ones. You may discover that a particular client creates subtle pressure every single time. And you may discover that a procedure is technically correct, but operationally awkward, and so crews quietly, without saying anything, work around it. You may discover that junior pilots disclose less than senior pilots because they don't really trust the environment yet, or that engineers and operational managers all hold a slightly different picture of exactly the same task. And that is not bad news, it's useful news, because you can now act before the occurrence. You can redesign a briefing, tighten a trigger, add a clear decision gate, rewrite unrealistic procedural step, or you can train a specific trap instead of just giving generic warnings. You can brief customers more honestly about operational requirements or limits, and you can support captains who make decisions in the interest of safety. And that support matters, because if people believe that every honest disclosure will be used against them, they'll stop disclosing honestly. They'll give you polished work, not the real work, and the organization will end up managing a fictional version of itself. So, If you want safety 2 in practice, create a culture where pilots can say, this is how the job unfolds on a bad day. And management uses that as valuable operational information. And let me push that a bit further. A lot of safety programs will still focus almost entirely on the sharp end. Why did the pilot continue? Why did the crew accept? Why did the captain not turn back sooner? And those are fair questions, but they are incomplete. The tougher questions are these. What did the organization imagine this task to be? What is it prescribed? What behavior has it rewarded? What realities had made these things hard to disclose? And what buffers had quietly eroded, or had it quietly eroded in the name of efficiency? What pressure had it allowed the schedule, the culture, or the customer expectation to apply to the operation? And once you ask those questions, normalization of deviance stops looking like a personal weakness alone. You start seeing systems drift. And escalation of commitment stops looking like a mysterious lapse. You start seeing the conditions that feed it. And that matters in helicopter operations because we are can-do people. We solve problems. We get into places that other people can't. We help. We move critical equipment. We support emergency response. We cover difficult situations. And that is one of the strengths of the industry, but it has a shadow. If we are not careful, can-do becomes must-do. Must-do becomes find a way, and find a way becomes, we always do it like this. And that is the slope. And a healthy culture, safety culture, is what keeps the slope visible. So I'm not saying don't start down the slope. We always have a slope. But it's about keeping that slope visible to be able to make better decisions. It creates a space for somebody to say early and openly, we may be drifting here. It allows challenge without embarrassment, and it allows junior crews to speak up. It allows senior crew to admit pressure, and it allows management to hear uncomfortable truths before they become expensive truths. And it's about safety 2 in practice is not about taking away initiative or stopping at every hint of trouble or just not going at all. It's about protecting sound initiative from drifting into unsafe routine. So if I had to leave you with one practical model today, it would be this. Do not wait for the next accident to teach you about drift. Go looking for the gaps now. Choose a recurring task, map the 4 varieties of work, and find where the overlap is weak. And then strengthen that overlap through better briefings, better triggers, better procedures, better customer expectation management, whatever it takes, and make sure the culture is healthy enough for those conversations to be real. Because a safe space is not softness, it's not low standards, it's not the absence of accountability. Without accurate information, you cannot have meaningful learning and meaningful accountability either. So when you hear phrases like, we always do it this way, or it has never been a problem before, or let's just have a look, don't just nod and move on. Treat those phrases as cues. That is the moment to get curious, the moment to ask whether work as done is moving away from work as prescribed, and whether work as disclosed is still honest enough for the organization to see what's really going on. Because the next hazard, it doesn't arrive as something new. It arrives as an old adaptation that has quietly become the new normal. And that is why I think the varieties of human work is such a useful, practical tool for helicopter operations. They give us a way to make safety 2 real. They help us look at successes, not as routine and not as luck, but as something that crews actively create every day under very variable conditions. They help us spot where that success depends on fragile adaptations, and they help us intervene while there is still margin left. And if we can build a large overlap between what we imagine, what we prescribed, what we say and what we actually do, we can build a kind of safety culture in which people feel safe enough to speak honestly about that reality. We will not eliminate risk. Helicopter operations will never be risk-free. But we will be in a much better space at seeing drift early, speaking about it openly, and correcting it before it becomes a report a funeral or a lesson paid for in blood. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is safety 2 in practice. Thank you. Hoping no questions.
Are there any questions for Dr. Coetzee? We have one question at the back.
I have many questions for her, but I'll stick to one. What is the cost of this? How does one physically implement it? It's obviously a lot of ideologies and philosophies and models, but how does it physically fit into an operation? And what does this cost? What would the cost implication of it be to management in order to implicate and implement, I should say, this more successfully?
It's a very good question, and it's always the first question that gets asked when we talk about safety 2. And I think that the reality is very different from what you imagine. People in aviation like to pay lots of money for consultants to come in and throw expensive sounding and expensive looking solutions at problems. And then we tick the box to say that we fixed the problem. And the good thing about safety 2 is it's really not something that we don't do already. Most places already have things going right 99% of each day. Think about it. Do we have accidents and incidents every day? No, I hope not. So we're already doing this. It's just about acknowledging that we're doing it and about using the information that we have at our disposal for the things that go right, and not in workshops or just in our normal day-to-day briefing. We've got a really good example at Henley Air. It costs us nothing, but the crews get together for a full briefing with everyone, the ground crews, the medics, the pilots, the vehicle tracking pilots. We all stand together and we have a brief about what the shift will entail, and that's a zero-cost, very effective way of implementing something like safety 2, and it's exactly what we do then. We take the work as done closer to prescribed and closer to the other forms of work. So it is something that really can be done with zero cost, never mind expensive fixes. I don't know if that answers it for you.
Thank you. Thanks. So that excellent question asked by the chairman himself also just puts into my mind the fact that what is the cost of not doing it? And I'm just making that as a statement. You don't need to respond to that.